This video is made possible by NordVPN. If you're buying things online on a not super secure Wi-Fi network, you really should be using a VPN, and that's where NordVPN comes in. Now, I know it's tempting not to bother and sort of just hope for the best, but really those stories you read about online of people having their data stolen, it does happen, and you don't want it to be you. Whenever I'm browsing on any Wi-Fi that isn't my own, I just keep the VPN on all the time so I don't have to worry about anyone stealing my data. But it's not just about security, you can also use it to change the country you appear to be in so you can get content that might normally only be available in specific geographic locations. NordVPN is also super fast, so watching a video is a breeze, there's no lag whatsoever. If you've used VPNs in the past and thought, well, this is kinda slow, not the case with Nord. And you can use it on all of your devices very, very easily: Android, Chrome, Windows, Linux, and on 6 different devices with one account. Also, there are no logs kept, unlike companies based in the EU or the US. NordVPN is based over in Panama, so they don't have to keep logs at all. Great for your privacy. Indeed, they are the only VPN to get a perfect score from PC Mag. So, start protecting your internet experience today. Go to nordvpn.com/VisualPolitik, use the code VisualPolitik to get 70% off a 3-year plan and an extra month for free. Protect yourself online today, and let's get into it. In the end, there was an agreement. Apparently, the standoff between Saudis and Russians has come to an end. Or at least, let's say the toughest part of the oil war that broke out in March has passed. As we told you here on VisualPolitik, at the March 6th summit of the so-called OPEC+, Russia refused to cut its production in response to the coronavirus crisis. Saudi Arabia's reply was quick and brutal. The Arab power quickly announced that it would flood the crude oil market to the limit of its capacity, and the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia's great political partner, would do exactly the same. This caused an earthquake in the energy market. In the following days, the price of oil fell more than 60% compared to the beginning of the year. As an example, the price of a barrel of Brent crude approached $20, a price not seen in a long, long time. As you can imagine, if the price of oil is sinking, there will be positive or negative consequences depending on which country we are talking about. For example, if we were talking about consumers such as Germany, Japan, or France, countries that have to import virtually all the crude that they consume, the effect is positive. But if we're talking about Russia, Saudi Arabia, or even the United States, then the consequences can be catastrophic. But hold on a minute, I said the USA, and that is indeed right. Since the fracking revolution began more than 10 years ago, US oil production has just kept growing. The fact is that the prospect of losing hundreds of billions of dollars for Russia and the Arab countries, alongside strong pressure from Washington, which even threatened to break their strategic relationship with Riyadh and impose tariffs on the import of Arab oil, caused OPEC+ members to renegotiate on the 12th of April 2020. And this time, there was an agreement. Oil countries that are part of what is known as OPEC+ will now cut their production by 9.7 million barrels per day during the months of May and June. Then, until the end of 2020, the cut will be 8 million, and finally, between January 2021 and April 2022, the adjustment will again be 6 million barrels per day. But hold on a moment, this agreement may not be enough, at least not in the short term. Let's say the deal has come too late, and with current production cuts, the deal is very limited under the circumstances. The fall in demand caused by confinement and closure measures of companies declared to combat the spread of coronavirus may still be much greater than supply. Some experts are talking about a drop in consumption of more than 20 million barrels a day. But beyond the price swings, which are going up and down more than a roller coaster lately, the new situation is causing investments that have already stalled to struggle to get back on track, at least not in the near future. To give you an idea, we're talking about a drop in global investments in crude oil exploration and production during 2020 of more than $100 billion, according to consultants Rystad Energy. And obviously, this is something that could have a huge impact on many economies, and that could even put Donald Trump's own re-election campaign in jeopardy. Yep, that's right. A collapse in oil markets can do a lot of damage in some of America's most prosperous states, such as Texas. Over recent decades, the Lone Star State has been one of the powerhouses of the US economy. Now it may be on the verge of facing a storm of unpredictable consequences, the shock of two major crises: the coronavirus crisis and the total collapse of the oil market. In this video, we're going to tell you all of the details about what's happening there. But first, we have to talk a bit about junk bonds.
The black gold boom and junk bonds.
I'm sure you've all heard of them, but probably have to ask, do you actually know what junk bonds are? It's basically when debt securities are known to have a high risk of default and have to pay higher interest rates in return. That is, for an investor to buy debt with a high probability of default, logically the return that debt gives is higher to offset the risk. We're talking about debt securities that are usually issued by little-known companies, startups, or companies that have a complicated financial situation. That's what are known as junk bonds, basically much riskier debt. But some of you might be wondering, but Simon, why are you telling us about these things in a video about Texas? Well, in a nutshell, these junk bonds have been the big driver behind the US's oil takeoff. So let me explain. When the price of oil was astronomically high in 2008, it reached over $150 a barrel, a new technology began to flourish, or rather, new developments made a technology that was already known and expensive to use suddenly much more profitable. Of course, I'm talking about fracking. As a result, fracking companies began to sprout up in the United States, largely thanks to the river of money with which Wall Street began to flood this sector over the next few years. It didn't matter whether they were new, small, asset-free companies or more questionable business models, it just didn't matter. The potential for almost unlimited profits and the Fed's low interest rate policy caused Wall Street to inject tens of billions, making this sector expand rapidly. For 10 of the last 11 years, energy companies have been the largest debtors related to junk bonds. In fact, since oil prices began to fall in 2016, more than 200 US producers have filed for bankruptcy with more than $120 billion of debt outstanding. And now the latest collapse in oil prices has put dozens and dozens of companies back on the ropes simply because this oil price, their operations are not only not profitable, they are also generating lots of debt. According to estimates from the rating agency Moody's, US oil exploration and production companies, alongside companies that control pipelines in the United States, face more than $200 billion debts that will fall due over the next 4 years. That is, more than $200 billion that they will have to pay back while oil prices are in the gutter and Wall Street is no longer willing to refinance at any price. In other words, many of these companies are about to go bankrupt. And do you know where half of these at-risk companies are located? Exactly. They're in the state of Texas, the largest oil power in the United States. It's the place where 4 out of 10 barrels of US oil are produced. If Texas were an independent country, it would be the 4th largest oil producer in the world, behind only Saudi Arabia, Russia, and the rest of the United States. That is, for years, Texas has been one of the big drivers of the US economy. And not just for oil, but even that may be at risk as well. Let's take a look.
The Texan Miracle.
It's likely that if you think about this place, the first thing that comes to mind is images of cowboys, rodeos, or endless barbecues accompanied by chili, lots and lots of chili. But the truth is that this state is much more than that. With 29 million inhabitants, Texas is the second most populous state in the United States, and for the last 2 decades, the Texan economy has been one of the locomotives of the US economy. The economy of the Lone Star State grows, on average, more than the national economy, and this southern state has been creating more jobs than the rest of the country for at least 3 decades. Since 2009 alone, 3 million new jobs have been created in Texas, and its population has grown by more than 14%, more than double the national average. Texas has long been something of a land of second chances, the place you could travel in search of work, cheaper housing, and a better standard of living. You want to Want an example? Well, look, although their nominal wages are not the highest in the country, if we take into account taxes and purchasing capacity for every dollar, then Texans have higher real wages than other Americans. That is, they have greater purchasing power. It's what's come to be known as the Texan miracle. The state of Texas is responsible for approximately 4 out of 10 barrels of oil mined in the United States and 30% of all petrochemical production. But it's not just about black gold. The Texan economy is much more diversified than you might think. Transportation, manufacturing, technology, and even healthcare are also very important. In fact, the world's largest medical complex is located in this state. It's Houston's Texas Medical Center. In fact, you may be surprised to hear that one of the industries that has grown the most in recent years has been renewable energy. Texas is already the largest producer of wind power in the United States and will soon become the second largest state for solar power behind only California. A quarter of all US solar investment was expected to be in this state by the end of 2020. But now, in 2020, with the pandemic that has broken out, all this prosperity could come to an end, at least for a good while. Listen up.
With COVID-19 spreading across Texas, I issued this executive order that requires all Texans to stay at home, except to provide essential services or do essential things like going to the grocery store.
The storm.
At this very moment, Texas is facing a huge economic storm. On the one hand, from a health point of view, coronavirus is affecting this state in the same way as in many Western countries. At the time of preparing this video, there have been more than 20,000 cases of the coronavirus in Texas, a situation that has led the state governor, Greg Abbott, to decree social distancing measures and closures in schools, restaurants, hotels, and much of the state's economic activity. However, in the case of Texas, from an economic point of view, the impact may be a little harder than elsewhere in the United States. Why? Because some sectors, such as transport and logistics, are crucial in the state. For example, Texas is home to such major airlines as Southwest Airlines and American Airlines, which are obviously suffering a lot from this crisis. Then on top of that, there is the blow that has caused the collapse of the oil market, which we told you about at the beginning of this video. Although the Texas economy is much more diversified than it was in the past, it is undeniable that since oil was discovered in an area east of Houston in 1901, the evolution of the oil market and the Texan economy has been hopelessly linked. And of course, the collapse in price from the fall in demand caused by the coronavirus has led to many companies just closing up. So far, more than 50 companies have announced that they will suspend investment operations and projects worth billions and billions of dollars in this state. And not only that, at least 35 companies in the Texas oil sector are on the brink of bankruptcy, and more than 130 extraction platforms have closed. Of course, all of this also involves thousands and thousands of layoffs.
More Texans filed for unemployment in the last 4 weeks than in all of 2019, Texas Tribune.
To give you an idea of what we're talking about, more than 1 million people have asked for unemployment benefits in the last 3 weeks of March and the first 2 weeks of April alone. And this is just the beginning. Unemployment is expected to exceed the state's all-time high in this crisis. Then something similar is going to happen with public revenue. Obviously, much of the oil revenue is going to evaporate, and of course, tax collection is going to suffer. In any case, with the OPEC Plus agreements, the worst-case scenario seems to have been avoided. But still, Texas, thriving Texas, seems to have a very complicated few months ahead of it. So will Texas recover from this storm? How far do you think the impact of this double crisis will go? Will we be witnessing the end of what so far has been one of the powerhouses of the US economy? And what policies do you think the state of Texas should put on the table? Well, we look forward to hearing from you in the comments, and I really do hope you enjoyed this video. Please do hit like if you did, and don't forget to subscribe for new videos. Also, please do check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. Also, please do check out our sponsor, NordVPN, link below, and thank you for watching.
And if you want to learn more about politics and hear even more of my lovely voice, you can join us at Reconsider Media. We have a podcast at reconsidermedia.com/podcast. See you there.